Welcome back. So, as promised, from here on out in the training, we are going to go into hypnotic language patterns, all different types of hypnotic language patterns. Now, there are literally hundreds upon hundreds of patterns that you could use and different ways to piece them together for different types of situations. But what I decided to do was to pick the top areas of communication that I think people struggle with the most, A, and B, could benefit the most. And so we're going to talk about areas like reducing resistance, creating authority, creating seduction, sales situations, and negotiation situations. So we're going to cover specific types of patterns that you can use for any one of these types of situations, and all of them are equally important. The one that kind of governs all of them, however, is this one, the resistance reduction concept. And as I've said over and over and over again, you've probably heard me drive this into the ground at this point, but people are naturally resistant, especially when they suspect that you're trying to influence, persuade, sell, or change their mind in some way. It's like a siren goes off in their mind and they start thinking to themselves, what do I stand to lose? What does this person stand to gain? What are they really after? What's their motive? What's their incentive? And so they become defensive because they think they're about to lose something. They think they're about to lose time, money, energy, or resources. And that all equates to resistance. And so when you can't close a sale, it's because there's resistance there. When you can't successfully negotiate something, it's because there's resistance there. When you can't create rapport with someone, it's because there's resistance there. Now, sometimes you reduce resistance to then create rapport, and sometimes you have to create rapport to reduce resistance. But resistance is really what's governing all of these issues and challenges when it comes to communication. So that's why I selected the resistance reduction patterns as the first classification that we're going to cover here. People's unconscious minds work faster than their conscious minds. So if you want to influence them effectively, you need to tap into the unconscious mind. Very few people are persuaded with reason. They think they are, but they're not. To reduce resistance, you want to put yourself in the back seat and make sure that the subject feels that he or she has the power. But in reality, you're going to be in the back seat driving the entire time without their knowledge. Now, again, when we say without their knowledge, it's not that we're being sneaky, manipulative, or trying to coerce people, but instead what we're doing is we're leveraging people's natural desires. And people naturally have the desire to feel like they are in control, especially when they're communicating with someone or when they're in a situation where they're being presented with an opportunity to change. People don't like change. People resist change. And so we have to make the person feel like they're in control in order to reduce resistance. So what we're going to go into right now are all types of resistance reduction patterns that you can use. So the first one is you probably already know. Now this presupposes that the subject knows something, but of course they're going to learn it after you tell them. Now this does two things. This is good for two reasons. The first reason is that people like to feel, again, like we just talked about, like they're in control. And people like to feel like they're smart. And so if you're introducing a new concept to somebody, you could encounter resistance simply because the person doesn't want to admit that they don't know the information that you're about to reveal to them, because that would in some way, shape, or form make them feel like they're not educated or they're not smart in some way. And so that creates resistance. The second thing that it does is it links. It begins to create the link between where their state of mind is now and where their state of mind is going to be after you introduce the information that you're going to give to them. So here's a perfect example. A salesperson would say, you probably already know that most customers pick organic produce over non-organic, even though it costs a little bit more. And so what that does is it presupposes that the person knows that organic produce is more valuable than non-organic, because people wouldn't pay more for something most of the time unless it was more valuable. Now that value could be in the form of anything. It could be in the form of health benefits. It could be in the form of return on investment. In this case, it's health benefits. The second thing that it does is it actually creates a little bit of social proof, because by telling somebody you probably already know that most customers pick organic produce, you're not only making the presupposition, but you're introducing that element of social proof. And the law of social proof tells us that when people are unsure of what to do or think in a certain situation, they typically look to see what other people have done in a similar situation. And it's the exact reason why on the cover of a book you'll see things like over 1 million copies sold. Because what that tells the person that's thinking about buying the book is if 1 million people bought this book, it must be a good book. So that's why you probably already know is very powerful, especially in this context, because you're introducing the information that you're presupposing that they know, and you're also blending it with a little bit of social proof. An investment broker could say something like, you probably already know that stocks have surpassed bonds in performance for the last 10 years, as a lead-in to sell stocks. So again, you're utilizing the presupposition and leading the person to where you want them to go. You're helping to strengthen the belief that you want them to have. In this case, if you're selling somebody stocks, you want them to begin to have the belief that stocks are the most viable investment. And so you do that by presupposing that they know that stocks are more viable investments in comparison to other things like bonds. Imagine what would happen if the word imagine sticks in the subject's brain for a long time. Imagine is a very, very powerful word. And the reason why it's so powerful, as I've said before, is because we think in terms of pictures. Even people that aren't visual think in terms of pictures. You could be the most auditory or the most kinesthetic thinker in the world, but if I tell you not to think of a pink elephant, you're going to think about that pink elephant. It's going to pop up in your mind. If I tell you not to think about a kangaroo, that kangaroo is going to pop up in your mind. And that's because we think in terms of pictures. And you may not realize it, but the same neural pathways in your brain work whether you imagine something or whether you actually see it in real life. Those same pathways communicate information in your mind, whether you imagine something in your mind or whether you actually see it in reality. The mind does not know the difference between something that you imagine or visualize and something that's not real. And so this is why visualization is very powerful. And we're not going to get into a course on visualization here. That's a separate topic altogether. But it's why it's so powerful and why top athletes constantly visualize themselves achieving the goal or achieving the task at hand or executing the move or the play that they're supposed to do. They visualize it over and over and over again so that the brain actually begins to process that information as if it already happened. So when it comes time for the person to do that, it doesn't feel like it's new to them. It feels familiar to them, and it feels like they've already done it. And so using the word imagine simply leverages the fact that we think in pictures. It prompts the person to start visualizing what we want to talk to them about. So a salesperson for a cruise would say something like, imagine what would happen if you were able to sail away for a few weeks and forget business for a while. So again, this you would learn through pacing, leading, paying attention, and tuning into the frequency of the subject, that they're wrapped up in business, and that maybe their personal life, their family life, their relationship is suffering because of that. Or maybe they're suffering because of it. Maybe they're just stressed out because they're constantly worried about business, and you've uncovered that and learned that through communicating with them. So what you would do is paint a picture for them that would ultimately make what you're offering look a lot more attractive. An arbitrator could say something like, imagine what would happen if you could walk away from this table with the problem resolved. If you could choose. Now in this case, the subject is going to start to think about what he or she would choose and why they can't choose. And this could be structured with a double bind as well. So a salesperson could say, if you could choose between the 50-inch and the 80-inch television, what would you choose? And again, this is a powerful presupposition, because it's presupposing that the person is going to make a choice. And that choice is that they're going to buy a TV. It's just a matter of which TV they're going to buy. Going back to the example I gave you earlier when I was competing with Steve in the fitness sales arena, and I was losing to him every month because I didn't have enough appointments. And the reason why I didn't have enough appointments is because I was giving the person a choice, but not the choice that I wanted. So if I wanted them to make an appointment, that's the choice that I wanted them to make. But I was also giving them the option to not make an appointment. Whereas Steve was not giving them that option. The only option he was giving them is whether they want to make the appointment for today or tomorrow. He was using the double bind. Same thing here. If you could choose between product A or product B, which would you choose? A seducer would say something like, if you could choose between going to Bermuda or Paris with me, which one would you choose? The subject, again, will start to think of what he or she would choose and why they can't choose. Would you be surprised? The answer is always no, and they're never surprised. Would you be surprised to find out that in a taste test, soda A won over soda B 3-1? Parent to a college-age youngster, would you be surprised to find out that 85% of college students regretted moving 25 miles or more from their parents? I wouldn't tell you to do this. Now, people don't like being told what to do. So by using the negative, you plant the same suggestion without actually telling them what to do. And again, this circles back to why people become resistant sometimes. People can be resistant for all types of reasons. Typically, it's because they don't want to lose time, money, energy, or resources. But sometimes it could be for a multitude of other reasons. And one of those things could be ego. People could just be so egotistical that by you making a suggestion to them, they feel like they're relinquishing control to you, and so they're resisting your proposal, even if your proposal is something that could dramatically benefit them. When I started building my email list, I was at the time a professional copywriter, and I was writing sales copy for some of the biggest names on the internet, like Dr. Steve G. Jones, Dr. Joe Vitale, etc. And as I was writing the sales copy for these people, I had a friend, a very close business associate, that was the reason why that I was able to have these relationships with these people was because of him. Because he managed Steve G. Jones's entire business. And so I would write sales copy for Steve G. Jones's products and offers, and then my friend would set up partnerships or joint ventures with other similar thought leaders like Steve G. Jones, and to promote his products and services. And these people would make a lot of money promoting them. So naturally, they would say to him, who's your copywriter? Who's the guy that's writing the copy that's getting this stuff to sell so well? And so he referred me to these people. Well, what I started doing when I decided that I wanted to break free from copywriting and I wanted to instead start teaching people all the communication strategies that I learned over the years, I knew that an essential element in that business would be having an email list. And so what I decided was one of the best ways for me to build an email list would be through bartering with these thought leaders that already had established names and email lists. So rather than charging them $5,000 or $10,000 to write a sales copy, I instead would come up with a free product of my own and ask them to offer it to their email list subscribers instead of paying me to write the sales copy. And so every time a person takes that offer, they become one of my email subscribers. And I was able to quickly build an email list very fast using that strategy. But this friend of mine, as good of a guy as he is, he can be very egotistical at times. And he's also a bit of what I call a one-upper. And what a one-upper is somebody that when you speak to them and you tell them about something that's positive that's going on in your life, they feel like they feel the need to always have to have one up on you. So for example, if you were to say, I just got a job making $50,000 a year, they would somehow have to remind you that they make $60,000 a year. If you told them that you just bought a brand new Honda, they'd have to remind you that they drive a Cadillac or a BMW. And so he's that type of guy. And so I knew that I needed him to reach out to these people to set up the barter agreements, because it would just be a lot more effective if it was coming from him. But I also knew that if I asked him outright to do this for me, I would encounter resistance, because he, in some weird way, shape, or form, really didn't want to see me surpass him in having an online business, as funny as that may sound. So instead, what I did was I had a conversation with him, and I asked him what he thought would be the best way for me to build an email list. And so I knew that he would come up with the same strategy that I came up with. And so after digging and digging and digging, he eventually came up with the exact same strategy, just like I thought he did, like I thought he would. And he said, well, I think a great idea would be for you to barter with some of these new clients that you just got. And instead of writing sales copy for them and getting paid to do it, you could write sales copy for it and instead have them send email traffic to your offer and start building an email list. And so when he came up with the idea, or so he thought he did, I asked him if he would mind being the one to reach out to these people, and he gave me absolutely zero resistance. So in reality, what I did was I thought of an idea, and then I subconsciously planted it in his mind and allowed him to feel like he came up with the idea, because that would then prompt him and motivate him to do what I wanted him to do instead of being resistant about it. So that's just a quick example of a situation where a person will do what you want them to do as long as you're not telling them what you want them to do. So an investment broker could say, I wouldn't tell you to invest in stocks versus bonds. The presupposition is that the subject will invest in something. Real estate, I wouldn't tell you that this house is in the best location for upside potential, so we'll look at some comps to find out. You're basically telling the subject that the house is in the best location for upside potential. I'm wondering if this gives you an opportunity to offer an embedded command. So, circling back to what we talked about before, an embedded command is simply when you take the command that you want to give to someone and you hide it in the context of a sentence or a conversation, but you slightly alter the command so that the subconscious picks it up. So a leader, someone in a leadership position would say, I'm wondering if you can look past your day-to-day needs and imagine how your behavior impacts the entire culture. Parent to a child, I'm wondering if your grades are important to you because you'll want to make an active choice about which college to go to. So the command that's embedded in there is your grades are important to you. Only a fool would not, or only a fool wouldn't. So don't strike by saying you're a really sharp buyer. Rings of being trite and bogus to the subject. So instead, use the negative. Then the person can't see themselves in that role. So an investment salesperson would say only a fool wouldn't have invested in gold over the last few months. Don't you think? Car salesman, only an idiot wouldn't choose the best car on the market for safety. Don't you think? So again, what it does is when you use the negative, you remove the person from the situation. So you're creating that vision of what you want them to think. You're strengthening that belief system that you want them to have by using the negative, but you're separating them from the situation. I don't know if. This is the exact opposite of what people will hear if someone's trying to actively manipulate them. It drops resistance completely. Salesperson would say, I don't know if the convertible or the family van is the best choice for you. Teacher, I don't know if you can put yourself in Winston Churchill's shoes during World War II. So when you are speaking to someone and you say to them, now again, this is a situation where you're trying to influence, persuade them, and you're dealing with resistance. If you tell someone, I know if, their resistance is going to go way up because they're going to be thinking, but how do you know? How can you be so sure? Are you being honest with me? Can I trust you? But when you say, I don't know if, their resistance instantly drops because you become more of now a counselor to them as opposed to a combative person or an authority figure trying to change their mind. Maybe Yule, once again, puts the choice back into the subject's hands and offers you the chance to provide embedded commands. So a coach would say maybe you'll decide that you have the courage to reinvent yourself again and you can explore options for making that happen, as opposed to saying you should have the courage or it's funny to me that you're not doing this. Instead, maybe you'll decide. Job seeker, maybe you'll decide that not only am I the best person for the job, I'm the only person for the job. Now that's a very strong statement because you're making the direct suggestion there and saying I'm the only person for the job, but you are still making the person feel like they are in control by saying maybe you'll decide. So that's a super powerful example right there of how you can combine the both of those together. I know you said that. You can utilize what the subject says and reframe it. Just avoid the use of the word but because it tends to get in the way of the reframing. So just a quick tip, in case you haven't heard me mention this before, you should get into the habit of removing the word but from your conversations when you speak with people. So even if you have something to say to them that might be a little negative or you might have to criticize them in some way, you instead would rather use the word and. So instead of saying to someone, I know this is a good car, but I'm a little skeptical about buying it, you would say, I know this is a good car and I'm a little skeptical about buying it. Or if you were having a conversation with someone and you were saying, I think you're a really good singer, but you need to work on your pitch a little bit more. You could instead say, I think you're a really good singer, and I think you need to work on your pitch a little bit more. And the reason for that is because usually the word but deletes everything that comes before it. So the positive part of it, where you tell the person that you think they're a good singer, actually gets deleted and they only hear the second part of it. But the word and joins it together. So just a quick tip right there, not to use the word but, especially in this context. So spouse to spouse, I know that you said you couldn't go on vacation over the next few weeks, and I would add that the issue is not the amount of work that you have, it's whether you'll choose to put family time front and center. Notice the embedded command in there. Choose to put family time front and center. So what we're using there is actually a couple of different patterns. We're using the I know you said pattern, but we're also using another pattern where we say the issue is not A, but the issue is B. And so what we're saying here is, I know you said you wouldn't go on vacation over the next few weeks, and instead of using the word but, I would add that the issue is not the amount of work that you have. It's whether you'll choose to put family time front and center. So you're, again, utilizing what the person said and just simply reframing it. Potential date. I know you said you're busy this coming Saturday, and I would like to add that the issue isn't whether you're busy or not, it's more if you can rearrange your schedule so we can be together. Again, the embedded command is in there. Rearrange your schedule. So those are just a few of the resistance reduction patterns that you can use when you are communicating with other people. And the examples that I gave you, of course, you can mix and match these in hundreds of different ways for virtually any type of situation. So think about them, start exploring them, and start writing down some examples that you think would be pertinent to situations that you might find yourself in personally or professionally. I'll see you in the next module.